The letter arrived on a Tuesday, but the trouble had been coming for much longer than that. Caroline knew it the moment she saw the envelope. The paper was thick and cream-colored, the kind used by people who had money and wanted everyone to know it. The handwriting was bold, masculine, and utterly unfamiliar. But the return address. The return address made her stomach drop straight through the floorboards. Charleston, South Carolina. She had not seen that name on a piece of paper in 7 years. She had not spoken it aloud in 5. She had done everything in her power to forget that city, that life, that version of herself who had worn silk dresses and danced at balls and smiled at men who were not what they seemed. Her hands shook as she carried the letter to the kitchen. Her husband Jacob was out in the fields. He would not be back until dark. She had time. Time to read it. Time to burn it. Time to pretend it had never come. She opened the envelope. "My dearest Caroline," the letter began. "You did not think you could hide forever, did you? I have found you. I know about the rancher you married. I know about the dusty little town where you have been playing at being a simple farm wife. I know everything. You owe me. You owe my family. And I have come to collect." Caroline stopped reading. She did not need to read the rest. She knew who had written it. She knew what he wanted. She knew that her carefully constructed life, the life she had built with nothing but hope and hard work and a desperate desire to disappear, was about to come crashing down around her ears. She had been Margaret Beaumont once, the only daughter of one of Charleston's oldest families. She had grown up in a mansion on Battery Street, with servants and gardens and a view of the harbor that people paid money to see. She had worn gowns imported from Paris and attended parties that lasted until dawn and been courted by the most eligible bachelors in the state. It had looked like a fairy tale. It had felt like a cage. Her father, Theodore Beaumont, was a man who measured everything in dollars. Love was a transaction. Marriage was a business deal. And Caroline, his only child, was his most valuable asset. When she was 19, he had arranged a match for her, a man named Edward Ashby. Edward was 35, wealthy, and connected. He owned shipping lines and warehouses and half the politicians in the state legislature. He was also cruel. Not in obvious ways, not in ways that left marks, but in quiet, insidious ways that eroded a person's soul over time. He controlled what she wore, who she spoke to, where she went. He read her letters before she could. He checked the mileage on her carriage. He had her followed when she went to visit her mother's grave. Caroline had tried to break the engagement. She had gone to her father, begged him, pleaded with him to understand. Theodore Beaumont had looked at her like she was a piece of furniture that had suddenly developed opinions. "You will marry Edward Ashby," he had said, "or you will leave this house with nothing. No money, no connections, no name. You will be dead to me." Caroline had chosen nothing. She had left in the middle of the night, wearing a plain dress she had bought from a servant, carrying a small bag with a few changes of clothes, and the pearl necklace her grandmother had left her. She had taken a train west, then another train, then a wagon, then a horse. She had traveled until the accents changed and the architecture changed, and the very air felt different in her lungs. She had changed her name to Caroline Smith, plain, forgettable, the kind of name that left no traces. She had found work as a seamstress, then as a cook, then as a housekeeper. She had saved every penny. She had learned to be invisible. She had learned to be hard. And then she had met Jacob. Jacob Whitmore was not handsome, not in the conventional sense. His face was too weathered, his hands too rough, his shoulders too broad from years of work that bent other men in half. He did not dance. He did not flatter. He did not promise her the moon or the stars or anything she did not already have. What he did was see her. Not the faded dress or the calloused hands or the careful way she avoided talking about her past. He saw her, the real her, the woman underneath. He had come to the boarding house where she worked, looking for someone to help him with his accounts. His wife had died 2 years before, leaving him with a ranch that was falling apart and a heart that had been broken into pieces smaller than dust. He did not want love. He did not want romance. He wanted someone who could add numbers and keep a ledger and maybe, if she was willing, cook a meal that did not taste like ashes. Caroline had taken the job. She had moved into the small room at the back of his house. She had balanced his books and mended his shirts and planted a garden in the hard, dry soil. She had not expected to fall in love. She had not expected him to fall in love with her. But he had. Slowly. Quietly. In the way he left an extra blanket on her bed when the nights turned cold. In the way he saved the last piece of pie for her, every single time, without being asked. In the way he looked at her sometimes, when he thought she was not watching, like she was the answer to a question he had stopped asking years ago. They had married in a simple ceremony, just the preacher and a few neighbors. Caroline had worn a dress she made herself, pale blue cotton that matched the spring sky. Jacob had worn his best shirt, the one without the patch on the elbow. He had held her hands in his and promised to protect her, to cherish her, to never let anyone hurt her. He did not know that someone was already coming. Now, standing in the kitchen with the letter in her trembling hands, Caroline realized that her past had finally caught up with her, and she had no idea how to tell her husband the truth. She did not burn the letter. She folded it carefully and tucked it into the pocket of her apron. Then she went about her day. She baked bread. She swept the floors. She fed the chickens and collected the eggs and hung the laundry on the line. She did everything she always did, hoping that the rhythm of ordinary life would drown out the pounding of her heart. Jacob came home at dusk. He was tired and dusty and hungry, and he smiled when he saw her standing in the kitchen doorway. He always smiled when he saw her. It was the first thing he did every single time, as if the sight of her was a gift he had not expected to receive. "How was your day?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Fine," Caroline said. The word was a lie. She could feel the letter burning a hole in her apron pocket. Jacob studied her face. He knew her too well. He could always tell when something was wrong. "What happened?" "Nothing. I'm just tired." "You're not tired. You're frightened." He tilted her chin up so she had to look at him. "Caroline, talk to me." She wanted to. She wanted to tell him everything. About Charleston and Edward Ashby and the father who had disowned her. About the years of running and hiding and being afraid. About the letter that had arrived this morning, threatening to destroy everything they had built. But the words would not come. They stuck in her throat like fish bones, sharp and immovable. "I'm fine," she said again. "Really." Jacob did not believe her. She could see it in his eyes. But he did not push. He never pushed. He simply kissed her forehead and went to wash up for supper. Caroline stood in the kitchen, listening to the sounds of him moving through the house, and felt the walls she had built around her heart begin to crumble. That night, she dreamed of Charleston. She dreamed of the mansion on Battery Street, with its white columns and its black iron gates. She dreamed of her mother, who had died when Caroline was 16, her face pale against the white pillow, her hand thin and cold. She dreamed of Edward Ashby, his smile sharp as a blade, his voice soft as velvet poison. "You belong to me," he said in the dream. "You have always belonged to me, and I have come to take you home." Caroline woke with a gasp, her nightgown soaked with sweat. The room was dark and silent. Beside her, Jacob slept deeply, his chest rising and falling with the slow rhythm of a man who had worked himself to exhaustion. She slipped out of bed and padded barefoot to the kitchen. The letter was still in her apron pocket. She pulled it out and read it again by the light of the dying fire. "I will arrive in 2 weeks. You will meet me at the station. You will come with me quietly, or I will tell your husband everything. The choice is yours." Edward Ashby. Caroline held the letter to the flame. The edges curled. The paper blackened. The words twisted and disappeared into ash. But the threat remained. The next 2 weeks were the longest of Caroline's life. She went through the motions of her days. She cooked and cleaned and tended the garden. She helped Jacob with the accounts and listened to his plans for expanding the herd and laughed at his terrible jokes. She acted, as best she could, like everything was normal. But she was dying inside. Every morning she woke up and thought about running. She could pack a bag, take the horse, disappear into the mountains. She had done it before. She could do it again. But then she would look at Jacob, at his weathered face and his rough hands, and the way he smiled when he saw her. And she would realize that she could not leave him. She could not disappear from his life without an explanation, without a goodbye, without him ever knowing why. She owed him the truth, even if the truth destroyed them. The night before Edward was scheduled to arrive, Caroline sat Jacob down at the kitchen table. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was pounding so hard she could barely hear her own voice. "I need to tell you something," she said. Something I should have told you a long time ago. Jacob set down his coffee cup. His eyes were steady, patient. He did not interrupt. He just waited. Caroline took a deep breath. Then she told him everything. She told him about Charleston, about the mansion and the servants and the father who measured everything in dollars. She told him about Edward Ashby, the engagement, the cruelty that left no marks. She told him about the night she had left, with nothing but a bag and a necklace and a desperate hope that she could become someone else. She told him about the years of running, the false names, the boarding houses, the fear that never fully went away. She told him about the letter, about the threat, about Edward's promise to arrive tomorrow and take her back. When she finished, she was crying, great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. She had not cried like this since she was a child, since her mother died, since she had learned that tears were a weakness and weakness got you killed. Jacob did not speak. He simply stood up, walked around the table, and pulled her into his arms. He held her tight, his chin resting on top of her head, his hand stroking her back in slow, soothing circles. "I am sorry," he said finally. "I am sorry you carried this alone for so long." Caroline pulled back, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "You're not angry?" "Angry?" Jacob looked at her like she had spoken a foreign language. "Why would I be angry?" "Because I lied to you. Because I married you under a false name. Because I brought danger to your door." Jacob shook his head. "You did not lie. You survived. There is a difference." He took her face in his hands and looked into her eyes. "I married Caroline Smith, but I fell in love with Margaret Beaumont. I just did not know her name until now." Caroline's breath caught. "You love me?" "I have loved you since the first time I saw you hanging laundry on the line. You were singing. Something about a river. Your voice was terrible, but your heart was so full I could feel it from across the yard." He smiled, a small, crooked smile that made her heart ache. "I did not care where you came from or what name you used. I cared that you were kind, that you were strong, that you made my house feel like a home." Caroline buried her face in his chest. "What are we going to do? Edward is coming tomorrow. He will not give up. He will not stop until he destroys us." Jacob's arms tightened around her. "Then we destroy him first." The next morning, Jacob rode into town alone. Caroline wanted to go with him. She wanted to face Edward herself, to look him in the eye and tell him that she was not his property, that she would never be his property, that she would rather die than go back to Charleston. But Jacob had asked her to stay. He had asked her to trust him, and after everything she had kept from him, she owed him that much. She spent the morning in the garden, pulling weeds with shaking hands. Every sound made her jump. Every bird that flew overhead made her look up, expecting to see the train's smoke on the horizon. Every hoofbeat in the distance made her heart lurch into her throat. The hours crawled by. The sun rose higher. The shadows shortened and lengthened again. And then, just before noon, she heard it. A wagon. Coming up the long dirt road. Caroline ran to the front of the house. Her legs felt weak, her vision blurred with tears. She could not tell if the wagon was Jacob's or someone else's. She could not tell if the man driving it was her husband or the man who had come to steal her away. The wagon crested the hill. It was Jacob, alone. Caroline's knees buckled. She grabbed the porch railing to keep from falling. Jacob climbed down from the wagon and walked toward her. His face was unreadable. She could not tell if he was triumphant or defeated or something in between. "What happened?" she whispered. Jacob stopped in front of her. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I met him at the station. He was exactly as you described, polished, charming, dead behind the eyes." "What did you say to him?" "I told him that my wife was not going anywhere, that if he wanted her, he would have to go through me." Jacob's jaw tightened. He laughed. He said I did not understand who I was dealing with. He said he had lawyers and judges and enough money to bury me 1,000 times over. Caroline's heart sank. "He's right. He does have all those things." "Maybe." Jacob unfolded the paper. "But I have this." Caroline took the paper. It was a letter. Not the one she had received. Something else. Something written on official letterhead, stamped with a seal she did not recognize. "What is it?" "A confession," Jacob said quietly. "Edward Ashby's former business partner came forward after I started asking questions. It seems Edward has been involved in some questionable dealings. Bribes, blackmail, embezzlement. The partner was willing to talk in exchange for immunity." Caroline stared at the paper. "How did you find this out?" "I have friends in this town, people who owe me favors, people who are willing to make a few inquiries on my behalf." Jacob smiled. "You are not the only one who knows how to keep secrets, Caroline." She read the letter. Then she read it again, and again. The words blurred together, but the meaning was clear. Edward Ashby was not the powerful, untouchable man he pretended to be. His empire was built on lies and corruption, and one push would bring the whole thing crashing down. "He will not bother you again," Jacob said. "I made that clear. If he comes near you, if he so much as writes another letter, this confession goes to every newspaper in the state. He will lose everything: his money, his reputation, his freedom." Caroline looked up at her husband. This quiet, steady man who never raised his voice, never lost his temper, never asked for more than she was willing to give. He had faced down a monster for her. He had risked everything, and he had won. "How did I ever deserve you?" she whispered. Jacob pulled her into his arms. "You do not have to deserve me. You just have to let me love you." Caroline cried then, not tears of fear or grief or desperation, tears of relief, tears of gratitude, tears of a woman who had been running for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to stop. That night, they sat on the porch and watched the stars. The air was cool and clean. The crickets sang their evening song. The world felt peaceful in a way it had not felt in years. "What happens now?" Caroline asked. Jacob took her hand. "Now we live. We build our life. We plant our garden and raise our cattle and grow old together on this land. We forget that Charleston ever existed." Caroline leaned her head on his shoulder. "Do you think we can? Forget, I mean?" "I think we can try." He kissed her hair. "And I think that is enough." 6 months later, Caroline received another letter. This one was not from Edward. It was from a lawyer in Charleston, informing her that her father, Theodore Beaumont, had passed away. He had left everything to her: the mansion, the money, the name. Caroline read the letter 3 times. Then she set it down and walked outside. Jacob was in the corral, working with a young horse. He looked up when she approached, saw her face, and climbed over the fence. "What is it?" "My father is dead," she said. "He left me everything." Jacob's expression did not change. "What do you want to do?" Caroline looked out at the land, the hard, dry soil that she had learned to love, the small house that had become a home, the man who had saved her, not with money or power, but with patience and kindness, and a love that asked nothing in return. "Nothing," she said. "I want to stay here, with you." "You could go back. You could live in that mansion, wear silk dresses, be a lady." Caroline shook her head. "I was a lady once. It almost killed me. I would rather be your wife. I would rather hang laundry on the line and bake bread and grow old in this dusty little town than spend one more day pretending to be something I am not." Jacob smiled. It was the smile she had fallen in love with, the smile that made his whole face light up like the sun coming out from behind a cloud. "I was hoping you would say that," he said. They sold the mansion. They sold the money. They kept nothing from Charleston except the pearl necklace that had belonged to Caroline's grandmother. She wore it on special occasions: their anniversary, Lily's birthday, the day they finally planted the orchard she had always dreamed of. Edward Ashby did not bother them again. The confession Jacob had obtained saw to that. He retreated to his crumbling empire and his hollow victories and his cold, empty house. He never married. He never had children. He died alone 10 years later, with no one to hold his hand. Caroline did not attend the funeral. She was too busy. There were chickens to feed and bread to bake and a husband who needed her to check the accounts. There was a daughter who was learning to read, and a garden that needed weeding, and a life that was full and rich and real. Jacob built her a swing on the porch, right where she could watch the sunset. They sat there every evening, side by side, her hand in his, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to deep, velvety blue. "Are you happy?" Jacob asked one night. Caroline thought about the question. She thought about the girl who had run away from Charleston, terrified and alone, carrying nothing but a bag and a necklace and a desperate hope. She thought about the years of hiding, of fear, of never quite belonging anywhere. She thought about the man beside her, the quiet rancher who had seen her when no one else did, who had loved her when she could not love herself, who had fought for her when she was too tired to fight. "I am happy," she said, and she meant it. Jacob squeezed her hand. "Good, because I am happy too, and I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure you stay that way." Caroline smiled. The stars came out one by one, prickling the darkness with points of light. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. The sound was lonely, but Caroline was not lonely. Not anymore. She had found her home. Not in a mansion on Battery Street surrounded by servants and silk and empty promises, but on a dusty ranch in the middle of nowhere, with a man who loved her, and a daughter who called her mama, and a garden that bloomed every spring no matter how hard the winter had been. She had found her home, and she would never let it go. If you have ever run from your past, if you have ever been afraid that your secrets would destroy the ones you love, take heart. The truth may be hard, but love is harder. And the right person will not run when they learn who you really are. They will stay. They will fight. They will hold you in the darkness and wait for the dawn. Where are you watching from tonight? Tell me your story in the comments. And if you believe that love can survive any secret, please subscribe. There are more hearts to heal and more stories waiting to be told.